to ease. Can you hear me? Right?
No. Maybe you have to take.
Can you pick it up roughly? Yeah? I'm just going to have to So too the governments of the Commonwealth, G7 and NATO are determined to work together to ease the pressure around the world, whether that means getting the grain out of Ukraine. I'm just going to project my voice. So too the governments of the Commonwealth, G7 and NATO are determined to work together to ease the pressure around the world, whether that means getting the grain out of Ukraine or encouraging moves to increase global energy supplies or helping countries to find alternative supplies of fertilizer. And we must, frankly, recognize the risk that not every country takes the same view of Putin's invasion or sees it in the way that we do. And so we've agreed together to work to explode some myths. We have to explode the myth that Western sanctions are in some way responsible for these price spikes, when of course it is the Russian invasion that has caused the shortages of food, and it is Putin's blockades that are stopping the grain leaving Ukrainian ports. And we need to explode the myth that it was in any way NATO that had responsibility for provoking the conflict. Nothing could be further from the truth. And if you want proof that NATO is a purely defensive alliance, you could have no more eloquent testimony than the accession of Finland and Sweden, quintessentially peace-loving countries that have been neutral for decades. And the fact that these two paladins for peace have joined NATO tells you all you need to know about NATO and all you need to know about Putin. We need to show the global south that we are the partners they need, that we NATO countries are the partners they need, and that we're there to help them as they make the transition to a green future, and that they should beware the trap, by the way, of running up huge debts to other countries that do not share our values and maybe do not have their best interests at heart. And the final myth we need to debunk is that when it comes to a crisis like this, Western democracies, because of the pressures that politicians face, do not have the same staying power. And I think that if Ukraine were to be crushed or forced into a bad peace, the consequences for freedom around the world would be appalling, and that view is shared by everyone in NATO. So let's be absolutely clear. The best way for us to win the argument around the world about our values, what we stand for, about our opposition to the use of force to change boundaries, about the primacy of international law, the best way to win that argument is for the Ukrainians to win and for Putin to fail in Ukraine. And that's why I'm pleased today that we've announced another £1 billion worth of military support. And if you wanted evidence of the amazing ability of the Ukrainians to fight back, to overcome adversity and to repel the Russians, then look at what has happened just today on Snake Island, where again Russia has had to cede ground. In the end, it will prove impossible for Putin to hold down a country that will not accept his rule. This has been a crucial summit in that we are resolved not just to support Ukraine, but we've agreed a new strategic concept. We're moving additionally beyond the doctrine of tripwire deterrence on NATO's eastern flank to a new approach of defense deterrence by denial. And countries around the table are also recognizing that they need to spend more. And in our case, that means meeting and being prepared to exceed the target we set for ourselves a decade ago of everybody spending 2% of GDP on defense, the goals that were then set for a very different era. And what we're saying is that we want Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General, to start work on that new target now, and he's agreed to do that. We need to invest for the long term in vital capabilities like future combat air, while simultaneously adapting to a more dangerous and more competitive world. And the logical conclusion of the investments on which we propose to embark, of these decisions, is that we will reach 2.5% of GDP on defence by the end of the decade. I want to say a big thank you to our Spanish hosts. I think they've done an amazing job. I want to thank Jens Stoltenberg. And my view is at the end of this Madrid summit, the NATO alliance is plainly in robust health and getting stronger, with new members and a renewed purpose. We can see that our work is cut out, and we can see that there are billions of people around the world, swing voters, who need to hear and to understand our arguments. But we have a huge advantage of knowing what we want, in believing in our ideas, and having the means to do what we want to do. And above all, we are united. And if history is any guide, then I believe that this great alliance will again be successful. Thank you all very much, and I'd like to go to the media, where I think we've got a question first from Chris Mason of the BBC.
Thank you, Chris Mason, BBC News. Prime Minister, what is the overall objective of the UK's help and strategy for Ukraine? Is it unequivocally getting the Russians out, restoring Ukraine's borders to how they were before the war? And, if I may, you've been out of the country for 8 days. Are you actually looking forward to returning home, given the ongoing speculation about your own future?
On the second point, yes, I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to get. Not that it's been wonderful being here in Madrid, as you want. As indeed, I enjoyed being in Kigali and Germany. But there's no place like home. So I'm keen to get back. On your point about where we're trying to, what's the goal? We can't be more Ukrainian than the Ukrainians. Everybody understands that. It's for Volodymyr Zelensky, his people to decide what they want to do. Whether they want to cut a deal with Russia to make some kind of peace, of course, that's entirely a matter for them. Though I noticed that after the attack on the shopping centre, I think I saw a poll saying that 89% of Ukrainians would under no circumstances contemplate a land for peace deal. So, I can see that the difficulties in Ukraine. Our job is simply to vindicate the principle, to stand up for the principle of the right of the Ukrainians to protect themselves. That's what we're doing. That's what everybody in the alliance is doing. And we want to give them the means to repel the Russians, to expel the Russians from the territory that they have occupied, because that is the right thing under international law. And as everybody has said, we want at the very least to put Zelensky in the best possible position he could be in, if and when he decides that there is anything to talk about. But at the moment, let's be absolutely clear, there doesn't seem to be anything to talk about, because it's not only that the Ukrainian people would find it very difficult to do a deal. Putin isn't even offering a deal. He isn't even offering a deal. Under those circumstances, it is only logical and to support Ukraine in the way that we are, and indeed to continue to intensify that military support. Because I think that they do have the potential to turn this round. We've seen what Ukraine can do to drive the Russians back. We've seen what they did around Kiev, around Kharkiv, now on Snake Island. I think the right thing for us is to keep going on the course that NATO has set out, no matter how difficult it may be. And that's what this summit has certainly agreed. Romilly Weeks of ITV.
One, two. I'll shout too. Prime Minister, the American assessment is that the war in Ukraine could grind on for an extended period of time. Do you really think you've won the argument amongst fellow leaders to support Ukraine to the bitter end? And do you think you can sustain an appetite for that back home?
So, Romilly, I think I think the argument here at NATO, the argument at G7, is very, very clear, and everybody, I think, there's a great deal of unity around this table. Everybody can see the point of principle, but everybody can see the practical consequences for the world. It would be disastrous if Putin were to succeed in Ukraine. So there's strong unanimity here. I think when it comes to the global congregation, yeah, I mean, the interesting thing in the last few days and weeks has been to listening to other voices, some of whom I think are under a misapprehension about what is really going on, about who's to blame for the spikes in fuel prices, under a misapprehension about what NATO really is. I'm afraid that we have to recognize that we have to do more as an alliance to counteract some of the propaganda that's coming out from the other side. And we have to be humble about that. We have to recognize that not everybody's necessarily automatically going to see it our way first time. I think the arguments are with us. I think we'll win the argument, but we need to make it. Hugo Guy from the Eye.
Thank you, Prime Minister. You talk about needing to win over other countries who are worried about the war's economic consequences. Are you at all concerned that people back at home who are struggling from high inflation, which is exacerbated by the war, are also going to gain sort of Ukraine fatigue, if you like? And what would be your message to them? And on a similar topic, HMRC has reported today that 6.1 million people in the UK are now paying high rate tax. You've consistently promised to bring down tax rates, but in many ways they're higher than ever. When will you bring down tax rates? Will it be this year?
Yeah, so Hugo, the point I would make about the cost of freedom, as it were, is that actually it is always worth paying. Unless we get the right result in Ukraine, Putin will be in a position to commit further acts of aggression against other parts of the former Soviet Union, more or less with impunity. That will drive further global uncertainty, further oil shocks, further panics, and more economic distress for the whole world. And the lesson of the last century, of the 20th century, is that things are only really sorted out, and you only really have a long period of sustained prosperity when you uphold the rules-based international system and when borders aren't changed by force. So that's the point I would make to people about what we're trying to do here. And I think people do get that, and they do see how important it is. And then on your point about taxation, don't forget, Hugo, that next month we've got a tax cut worth £330 on average for households, for all payers of national insurance contributions coming in, a very substantial tax cut. In addition to what we've done on fuel duty and on council tax, of course, we always want to try to reduce burdens, but we have to do it in a sensible and a responsible way. Chris Smith of The Times.
Struggle more than others. Inflation is going to stay high for a very long time. You've talked a lot about how this is going to abate fairly soon. Are you at risk of being complacent about inflation? Do you need to do more to deal with the fallout of this war?
So I think we have to recognise that the UK is exposed to two particular types of issue. We've got very, very low unemployment, which means we have, by comparison with a lot of other countries around the table, which means we've got a very, very tight labour market, which has an inflationary pressure, and the balance of our energy mix is also difficult at the moment. We have to deal with those issues. We've got to deal with a lot of the underlying causes of cost pressures for people, for businesses, for the whole country. And so we've got to help people with the costs, with the £1,200, all the other help that we're giving, helping people with try to get through the price spike. But you've also got to try to look at the root causes. And I think there are things going on in the UK economy, whether it's in the housing market or the energy market, our transport systems, which are driving the way government spends money, which are driving unnecessary cost pressures for people in our country. And those are the things that we need to fix as part of our plan for a stronger economy. So, Chris, in answer to your basic, I in no way minimise the importance of this, but nor do I minimize. This is a big chance for us now to do things differently and do things better and create foundations for a much stronger economy. Ben Glaze, The Mirror.
Prime Minister, thank you. Why are you still cutting 9,500 troops in the British Army, and why are you breaking a manifesto pledge to spend 0.5% above inflation on defence spending?
Well, Ben, if you look at what we're doing with the British Army, I think most fair-minded people, if you ask Jens Stoltenberg, which is the country that's really committing defence spending to NATO, which is the country that's contributing the most to creating the right level of investment for the Western Alliance, it is the UK. And I think we're now spending, last year we spent the third biggest amount on defence of any country in the world in 2021. We've increased defence spending by 24 billion pounds in the latest spending round. And if you look at what we're doing right now, we're well over the 2, so on the 2.3%, we're at 2.3% now, and you will have heard what I've just said about the logical, if you protract what we're doing on AUKUS, on FCAS, you know, we're going to get to 2.5% by the end of the decade. Yeah, look, I mean, I hear that. I just think that the most important thing is to have armed forces, armed services that are brilliantly equipped, superbly able to do the jobs that they need. We have the best troops in the world, but I want them to have the kit that they need. And I want them to have the kit that they need. Harry Cole's son.
Thank you, Prime Minister. After you took the mick out of Putin at the G7 for posing topless, I regret to inform you he has hit back. He said that if you did the same, it would be a disgusting sight, and Western leaders should stop abusing alcohol and other bad habits, do physical exercise and take part in sports. One, are you going to take that, and would you like to respond? And secondly, do you really think it's wise to pick a war of words with a man your own government calls a lunatic with a very large nuclear arsenal?
No. I think the most important conclusion that Vladimir Putin needs to draw from what's happened today, the last few days in NATO and then previously in the G7, is that we are totally united in condemning what he's done in Ukraine. We're resolved to do everything that we can to help the Ukrainians to repel his troops, and I think that's the thing that he should think about. I think that he should think about the consequences of his barbaric actions, the way it has his invasion has actually brought the West together. NATO, G7, EU. Look at the way people have come together, and if he wanted, less NATO on his borders by getting into Ukraine, which, by the way, it was never remotely likely that Ukraine was going to join NATO any time in the foreseeable future. Everybody knew that. It was completely mythical. But instead, what he's got is Sweden and Finland breaking their historic vows of neutrality because they're so appalled and repelled by his violence and his aggression. And I think that is an absolutely devastating comment on what he has done and his behaviour. Jasmine Cameron-Chileshi of the FT.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Earlier this week, Foreign Secretary Liz Truss called China an aggressor, and she said that the West had been complacent over China. Do you agree with her assessment? Do you think the UK needs to re-examine its relationship with China?
Look, I think on China, it's very important that we remember that we have a huge economic relationship with China. So does every country around that table. America's got a gigantic free trade deal with China. But at the same time, we've got to understand that there are areas in which we need to compete, contest, and sometimes challenge what China is up to. And that is clear. And we had a long discussion in the UK, as you'll remember, about Huawei. It was very difficult, it was very painful. But in the end, there was just a limit to the way economic interpenetration could go, and it clashed with the our need for national security. And so we had to fix that. And what we're doing around the world is making sure that we have that balance and that we stand up to China wherever is necessary. And I think, but also being realistic. It is very, very important that we understand that China is a great country. It's going to be a gigantic fact of the world's economy for a long time to come. So you need to. There has to be a balanced approach, and every country around that table can see that. But obviously, one of the reasons why what is happening in Ukraine is so important is because there is a clear read across to other theatres, and that's why we're sticking up for the rules-based international system in the way that we are. I mean, obviously we're sticking up for it in Ukraine because it's overwhelmingly the right thing to do, but there's also a read across. Spanish media, Antenna 3, Sarah Romero.
Prime Minister, thank you for the floor. How important is the southern flank of North Africa for NATO, and will NATO defend Ceuta and Melilla in case of aggression? Thank you.
Thank you. Listen, Sarah, on your specific question about Ceuta and Melilla, that's a brilliant point. I don't think I have the answer to that because I mean I know that the two. I think is enclaves the right word? I don't know how to express. I mean, I'm vaguely aware of their constitutional status, but I would hesitate to offer a doctrine on the extent to which they're comprised within the Article 5 guarantees. That doesn't mean there isn't an answer. It just means that unfortunately, Sarah, I don't know what the answer is. If they're Spanish territory, if it's held that they're Spanish territory, then I imagine that they're protected under Article 5. Okay, let me go as far as to say that, right? On your wider point about the Maghreb and the North African littoral, I think there's a big agenda for NATO, and I think we should be thinking about it. And I think one of the big strategic mistakes that we've made as Europeans is not to recognise that that is the origin of so much of the migration, so much of the turmoil, and problems in North Africa feed back into the Sahel and make things worse. So there's a negative feedback loop. So I'd be in favour of much greater engagement with all those areas, and definitely a project for NATO. Sergei Sidorenko of European Pravda.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I'm here, and on the other side. Yeah, here.
Not to be confused, by the way, with Komsomolskaya Pravda, right?
Absolutely not.
I can see some sniggering from there.
You can recognize me by Zelensky type T-shirt.
Yes, exactly.
First of all, I would like to thank you and to the UK for the support for Ukraine that we are really do enjoy, and you are, I would say, even leading military support for us. But at the same time, and also I would like to thank you for the words that Ukraine have to define its future and its victory, and Ukraine did. Even President Zelensky have said these days that we are going and we need to win this year. Not to be that much involved in the war. Do you see a real chance for Ukraine to win, considering that NATO allies are not so happy to provide us so needed weaponry? Because we see no modern tanks, no jets, and so on. Maybe you see some ways to do that in that time frame. And also, even more important, as you said just now, that no one did expect to see Ukraine in NATO, which is sad to hear about. Now, is there a chance?
I'm just being realistic there.
But is there a chance to become a member of NATO one day after Ukraine wins, or NATO is still that much afraid of Russia that cannot even think of it? Okay. Because there is no other.
Thank you. Look, I mean that's really good. So the reason I went to thank you very much, Sergei. So the reason I went to Ukraine shortly before all these summits began was really I wanted to get a real feel for where President Zelensky and his administration were and how they saw things going. And it really is clear, as you say just now, they do see a way in which they can change the dynamic this year, in the next few months. And I think that's important, and I think it means we have to help them as much as we can, because they've shown that they can resist, they can show their amazing ability to fight back. And that's why I think the most interesting recent development has been the MLRS, the multi-launch rocket systems which have been going to Ukraine, and I'm told that Ukrainian troops are proving very adept in using them. Now, we've got to make sure that that's right, and that the Ukrainian troops, heroic as they are getting the maximum value out of the stuff that we're able to send. But we think that they do indeed have it in their power to repel the Russians and to get them back to the pre-February the 24th position, and that's certainly what Volodymyr says he wants to do, and he set out a plan for doing that. Now, as for the ultimate solution for Ukraine's presence in the security architecture of Europe, it's clear to me what should then happen. It's clear to me that, leaving aside the question of an Article 5 guarantee, what you have, or what you should have, is the Western powers, whether all of NATO or just some NATO countries, should be offering deterrence by denial, so that we so fortify Ukraine with NATO-grade weaponry, plus intelligence, plus training, that no future attack is conceivable. That's stage one, and that's the position that we want to get to. And I think that will prove to be a very, very effective solution. There can then be a further argument down the track about NATO, but that would be my interim solution. Okay, everybody. I was told to be no more than 9. Thank you. See you later. Thank you.